I heard you got the fever for the flavor.
It's the flavor. It's the flavor.
I heard you got the fever for the flavor.
It's the flavor. It's the flavor.
It's time to kick the flavor, gonna make it real funky for you. It's time to kick the flavor, gonna make it real funky for you. Ain't it funky now? Here comes the flavor. Ain't it funky now?
Hey everyone, it's TahoeJBennett from Comics Bodega and the Funky Flavor Podcast, and we're back with another Kickstarter Spotlight. You know, have you ever asked yourself, what if Mad Max took place in The Wizard of Oz? I have on a couple occasions. As you can see here, well, you're going to be able to find out as we return to the occupied zone with the OZ3. The fantasy epic returns for its curtain call this summer, and I'm glad to be joined today by a phenomenal writer we've had some history with on in my circle in media, and not this is the first time with Comics Bodega, but it's good to have him back. We've been able to catch up a little bit, so please welcome the Ringo Award-winning comic book writer known for Spencer and Locke, Going to the Chapel, Scout's Honor, The Devil That Wears My Face, Speed Racer, Space Ghost, Captain Planet, Moon Knight, Savage Avengers, Punisher, Cable. This guy is like the who's who. They're just this massive. And I'm so happy for his success too. After winning his Ringo Award, it's been nothing but uphill, and I'm pleased and just honored to have back writer David Pepose. David.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. What an intro. That is very kind of you. I feel like I was just like kind of, walking down to my hype music for a cage match. Thank you for all that. It's so good to be on the show. My first time at Comics Bodega, but not my first time with you. And yeah, I'm excited to talk all things the OZ and all things comics with you today.
And like we were talking off camera, our first interview that we did, kind of an interview, was at Rose City Comic Con in 2019, where we had this is when I was back with Pop Cult HQ. I worked there for 10 and a half years prior to starting the bodega. And I had this feature where I would speak with the creator and then follow them around the convention to people that they admire or feel need a bigger spotlight, who they're fans of. And David was on there at Rose City Comic Con. And that was 2019. In April of 2020, we had the very first episode of my Pants Optional feature because pandemic just started. So I created this feature. He was on the very first episode. We just talked comics. And then also on episode 9 is when we spoke about the OZ #1, formerly known as Project Saffron.
Yeah.
August 2020. So yeah, David, welcome back to Kickstarter after, let's see, that was August 2020, but OZ2 was in 2021. So 5 years now.
Yeah, it's been a long
But it's been a busy 5 years.
It's been a busy 5 years. But the OZ is something that's literally just been something that's been a slow drip since the last Kickstarter. For those who aren't familiar with the book, the elevator pitch, like Jason said, is what if Mad Max took place in The Wizard of Oz? It's the story of Dorothy Gale's granddaughter, who's an Iraq war veteran who has come home and grappling with disillusionment and PTSD. And one night things get bad. She's been living on her grandmother's farm in Kansas, and she drives out to the cornfield in her Humvee with her service revolver. But before she can pull the trigger, a tornado strikes. And so our new Dorothy finds herself stranded in the war-torn land of Oz. And that's when she learns that all of her ailing grandmother's stories, they were all true, but they came at this harrowing cost because killing 2 wicked witches in a week and getting the Wizard of Oz to split and then just skedaddling, that's not a happy ending. That's a power vacuum not unlike Baghdad. And so our new Dorothy has to kind of turn to her grandmother's former friends, the Tin Soldier, the Prince of Lions, Jack Pumpkinhead, in order to stop the iron-fisted tyrant of Oz, the Scarecrow, who sort of used his brain to basically turn Oz into a war machine. He's looking for the silver slippers so he can invade our world next. And so, yeah, it sort of becomes Dorothy's second chance, in order to free the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ.
The
And
OZ.
uh, this is a book that really kind of dates back to the early days of my career. When I wrote the first volume of Spencer and Locke, I had no idea what the response was going to be. If people hated that book, I was not going to come back. Writing that book was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also one of the most rewarding. When that book took off, when people seemed to really like that book, I wrote down a handful of ideas, in addition to doing Spencer and Locke too. I had written down Going to the Chapel. I had written down Grand Theft Astro, which is something that I'm still very interested in getting off the ground, and the OZ. So this is like an early book for me. And so I wrote that book. I started writing that book in 2018. And I wound up kind of, working with Ruben Rojas starting in 2019. And we launched the Kickstarter in 2020. The first Kickstarter, we had already had kind of a lot of material that we could kind of be off to the races with. By the second Kickstarter already, Ruben was still drawing it, and he's a really talented artist, but he's got a very methodical style. So even that Kickstarter kind of took a little longer for me to get off the ground than I would have liked to. And by the time we had finished that second Kickstarter, we were already working on issue 3. This book has long been written. I wrote this book concurrently with Scout's Honor, back in, I guess it was 2020. I finished writing the OZ. So before even the first Kickstarter launched, the book was already scripted.
Right.
But Ruben, like I said, a very methodical artist, but also, he's an artist who, like, real life kind of got in the way, in just that he got married, he had a kid, he was living in Spain during, like, the worst of COVID. There's been family stuff. And so I had to kind of make a choice in terms of, I wanted to make sure the book stayed consistent, in that, I didn't want to kind of try to sub in another artist in the last third of the book. That would have felt like a lose-lose to me. And on top of that, I had just been tapped over at Marvel. And so I quickly learned that my schedule was going to be a little bit of dancing in between the raindrops, not in terms of the production of it all, but in terms of the promotion of it, of just figuring out when can we get a good runway for this book that is not going to be interrupted by a publisher saying, hey, we're going to announce this book at this time. So it's been kind of a slow drip, just getting the artwork together. But my thinking was, we've made readers wait. I want to make sure that when we hit launch in this Kickstarter, the book is done. 100% written, drawn, colored, lettered. This thing is ready to go to the printer
Nice.
the moment that the Kickstarter starts. And so that's been sort of the reason why it's taken a bit, is really just kind of getting everything together and making sure that there isn't anything that would distract focus from the promotion itself. So yeah, it's been a long time coming, but we've really structured this campaign to streamline everything as much as humanly possible, to make sure that, like, the moment that the Kickstarter ends, we have a pretty clean print number, that we can immediately go to the printer to say, this is what we need printed. We're also working with the amazing team at Laguna Studios for fulfillment, which is great because, listen, I recognize I am a comic book writer who's doing 4 books and has a daughter on the way. You do not want me to be the bottleneck, and so Laguna has a lot of experience fulfilling Kickstarter campaigns. They are very excited to be working with us on the OZ.
Nice.
And so that way, we have an estimate, for we're trying to get everybody's books by the holidays at the absolute latest. But between sort of the way that we have structured our Kickstarter, between sort of our discussions with Comic Impressions, our printer, with our discussions with Laguna Studios, we're anticipating people are going to get their rewards much earlier than that. Sort of the holidays is sort of the buffer on buffer. But yeah, this book, I'm so excited. This is our third and final Kickstarter for the series.
Right.
It's double sized, just like the previous 2 issues.
Yeah, they're thick. They're
Yeah,
thick.
these books are big boys. I
Issue
wanted to make
one.
sure, knowing that Kickstarter has a different type of price point, has a different type of timeline to it, that our readers got their money's worth. And so,
Right.
um, as we last left Dorothy in our last issue, her quest to find the silver slippers went sideways. She has
Right.
been locked in the Scarecrow's dungeons, and unfortunately, one of the silver slippers has latched itself to her foot. And so this issue is kind of open up with this battle of wills between Dorothy and the Scarecrow of sort of, can Dorothy hold out long enough to escape, or, will the Scarecrow kind of push at her pressure points enough to get that silver slipper? Um,
Right.
and that'll sort of lead us into sort of our big climactic final battle between the Resistance and the Scarecrow's forces. And
Uh,
without spoiling too much, the Scarecrow has a couple of secrets up his sleeve that are really going to kind of rattle Dorothy and her team to their core, and is really going to sort of flip this whole series on its ear. So I'm very excited for people to kind of see what the deal is going on with all of this. What is the Scarecrow's end game? What does Dorothy learn about the secrets of Oz? During all of this, the book looks fantastic, I should add. Ruben
yeah.
really he showed a great deal of commitment in terms of like making sure that this book looks excellent. And Whitney Cogar, our colorist, she
And
works.
I was going to ask that because you took the time to make sure that it worked out with Ruben. You
Yeah,
know, the first two issues you had Whitney Kogar on colors and DC
DC
Hopkins on
Hopkins.
letters. Are they
Yes,
both back?
yes, they are both back.
Oh, nice.
I wanted to make sure the whole creative team stuck around for this one.
Okay.
And that's another reason why the book has taken a little longer, is just sort of dancing between everybody's schedules in terms
Right,
of, we
right.
got the art and now just getting the colors together and then getting the lettering together. But they are all on board. And we've got a real murderer's row of talent on the variant covers as well. Monhouse is returning. He did variant covers.
For the main cover, like you did the
Yeah,
first two.
he did our B cover
And for people that don't know, David has history with
yeah,
him
Mon
as his
Mon
artist on Spencer and Locke.
yes, Mon did variant covers for me for Spencer, the first two volumes.
And you guys also work together on the
In the
Master of
chapel.
Kung Cthulhu.
Yeah, the Master of Kung Cthulhu in Cthulhu is hard to spell. That's a deep cut in my bibliography. Yeah, Mon and I go way back to my first book, and so and his variant covers have historically been the most popular of our runs. So it made sense to bring him back for round three. We're also joined by Joshua Hood
Okay.
from the classic You Can't Go Home Again. He's doing an amazing homage to Carlos Pacheco's X-Men 80 for his variant cover. And then
Okay.
Serge Acuna from
Oh,
Nightwing
nice.
in the Flash is doing a really cool kind of team shot of Dorothy and company. And we've got a kind of a murderer's row of talent doing pinups as well. Yeah, I don't think it's spoiling too much to say. We did have a stretch goal fifth cover for our last two Kickstarters. I would not be surprised if we did a fifth one for this campaign as well. So yeah, it's been really fun to kind of get the band together on this. Now, there are plenty of people who did not know who I was when the first two Kickstarters came out. I've been very fortunate in that I've had a lot more eyes on my career in the aftermath of the OZ's second Kickstarter and the aftermath of our book winning the Ringo Award in 2022 or 2021. So we have catch-up tiers for people who missed everything. You
Right.
can get all three issues in print. You can get all three issues in digital. There are tiers where you can get all the variant covers for issue 3. There are tiers where you can get all of the variant covers for the whole run. Um,
Okay. Okay.
we've also got a la carte options in terms of add-ons. So every tier, if you're like, I I was on the first Kickstarter, but I missed the second one. That's fine. You can add on the issue two main cover to your purchase. So we've got a lot of options for people, and also for those folks who are interested in my other work, we have all of that on offer as well, both in terms of add-ons individually, but also we've got discount tiers. So we've got you can get 5 of my creator-owned books in addition to the OC3. Spencer, both volumes of Spencer and Law, Going to the Chapel, Scout's Honor, and Devil That Wears My Face.
Right.
We've also got a tier with 5 of my Marvel books. So both volumes of Savage Avengers and Moon Knight and Punisher and Cable. We've also got another tier with 5 of my licensed books. So both volumes are of Space Ghost. We've got Captain Planet and both volumes of Speed Racer. So, we got a lot of options for that sort of thing. If you're a retailer who's watching this, we've got discount tiers as well. We're offering the books at 50% off bundles. So, and you can mix and
Nice.
match between issues. You can mix and match between covers. You can mix and match whether or not I sign them. We want to make sure that we're really kind of going the extra mile for the retailer community. And one lucky retailer, as we've done with every campaign, we are offering for me to do a store signing. Any store in the continental U.S. We're offering that to one lucky store. I Want More Comics in Denver was our lucky store last go round. So yeah, it's I think the OZ really has been kind of a team effort, both in terms of the creative team, but also the amazing Yellow Brick Road Warriors who have backed us across 2 campaigns. We've had over 1,500 individual readers across our 2 campaigns, and a bunch of readers who came back for the second one. So this is the perfect time to really kind of get the entire series lock, stock, and barrel.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the OZ is some of my best work. I am working with just a top shelf creative team on it. So I know it's been a long time coming, but I can promise you this series is going to be worth the wait.
I can't wait, and it's really gonna just wrap everything up, and I'm excited for it. It's glad to hear that they're these larger issues again as well. Um, it's funny you mentioned cable. I was going through my comics are all sorted everywhere. Have you ever gone through your comics and didn't realize like where did I get this or how did
Yeah,
I?
yeah, yeah.
When I was going through these, I found like when did I get a New Mutants 87? And I'm like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'll take
I,
it.
Cable was such an interesting character to write. I know I'm going on a little tangent, but that was a Cable Love and Chrome. For those who haven't read that book, I had pitched it a little tongue in cheek as Edge of Tomorrow meets The Fault in Our Stars.
Uh,
In that, the X-Men, I think, are affectionately known for having sort of these very Byzantine, convoluted continuity that sort of builds on top of each other in this sort of weird patchwork fashion, and the stories sort of build out of this kind of mutant continuity. Cable is the most X-Men of X-Men. He's Cyclops' son with a clone of Jean Grey, and he's infected as a baby with a techno-organic virus by Apocalypse, and then he's sent into the far future so he can learn his powers to sort of suppress this disease and also defeat Apocalypse in the far future. And then he, is raised by the disembodied minds of Cyclops and the real Jean Grey through his adolescence, and then he manages to become a freedom fighter in the future, and then he goes back in time to train the next generation of Marvel's X-Men, and that's just like when you get him in the modern day. There's so much going on with Cable.
right, right.
And the thing about Cable Love and Chrome is, I was talking with my wife, about the character, and I was really having a tough time wrapping my brain around it. And she was saying, like, what does he have that nobody else does? And that was kind of became the kernel of the series, is that Cable has been struggling his whole life with something called the techno-organic virus. It's a sci-fi disease, but it's basically turning anywhere from, depending on who's writing it, it's a third to 2/3 of his body into sort of machinery. And so he's
Right.
been using his mutant powers of telekinesis to kind of hold it back, day by day, minute by minute. But he knows that one day his luck's going to run out. And, so that kind of became an interesting story about a time traveler who's living on borrowed time, but also feels this profound sense of isolation because, you know, he's the only one that he knows with this condition. And so I thought, what would happen if he met somebody else? And what would happen, somebody who doesn't have telekinesis and has had to kind of face their own mortality in a way that he he can't, that he hasn't been able to. And then what happens when the inevitable happens and he loses this person? And it's one thing to mourn when you're a normal person. It's another thing to mourn when you're a time traveler. What are the lengths
Sure.
that
Oh,
people would go to kind of undo what's happened? And so that was a really fun book to work on, really interesting book, and it certainly kind of went places emotionally that I had never really explored before.
right,
Heavy
right.
book, in a lot of ways. But yeah, that was an interesting book to work on. And yeah, definitely. I wrote it sort of as if you've never read Cable, you can get in on board with this one. It felt like a story that you could only really tell with him.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm really proud of the work. Mike Henderson did a great job on the art, and yeah, it was fun getting to play around in the X office for a minute.
Oh, I can only imagine. I mean, it's such a storied, history, and it's such an integral part to the industry as a whole, and its impact. Um, and plus, you get to work with a great character. Just like, and you've had the opportunity with others, like your two current titles running with Speed Racer at Mad Cave Studios and Space Ghost at Dynamite. So
Yeah.
you're getting to play with some well-known characters who have established history and backstories, and then you get to put your fingers all over it.
Yeah, Space Ghost and Speed Racer, my two current ongoings, they're really fun and interesting projects that I never really anticipated that I would sort of carve out this niche for myself as the licensed cartoon guy. I've already done three adaptations of Saturday morning cartoons between Space Ghost and Speed Racer and Captain Planet.
Right.
Um, and I feel like I'd even dip my toe in the pool a bit of Marvel, having worked on Conan the Barbarian with Savage Avengers and Darth Vader, and in the Black, White, and Blood, or Black, White, and Red anthology. But the great thing about the licensed books in particular is, for the most part, most people are not expecting you to just kind of try to parrot what has come before, to do sort of a lost season of the original show. I find that to be kind of a lose-lose um, proposition because it's very difficult to kind of parrot that old style in a way that um, feels like what those people did, and so you kind of lose your
Sure.
own individuality as your own voice as a writer, but also I think it makes the books very inaccessible if you do it that way, because then you're just preaching to the diehards,
Yeah.
and you kind of shut out anybody who might potentially be curious as to who these characters are. And I don't think the core of diehards, frankly, is enough to kind of make a book sustain long term. You need new blood to kind of help sustain it. And so my approach for all these books, honestly, I've been taking kind of the J.J. Abrams' first Star Trek movie is one of my favorite movies, and I've been taking an approach kind of similar to that, in that I have sort of watched all of the cartoons. I have taken very detailed notes. I've tried to, identify what are the important landmarks in terms of storylines, in terms of villains, what
Right.
are sort of personality traits and patterns and trends that have sort of emerged in the original show that maybe the original creators didn't even intend, because those shows are often flying by the seat of their pants. But through the benefit of hindsight, I can kind of see like, oh, there's, patterns that emerge. Um, Taking all of that and then kind of establishing a brand new continuity based on that. So you don't have to
Well,
depend
that's
on what.
huge because then you have to do that with a character like that because you have such diehard fans,
Yeah.
you
You want to
gotta
prove you've done your
you gotta
homework.
know a good part of who he's about to get him, or they could be brutal on social media.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and so, I've been really fortunate that approach seems to have really caught on with the three books that I've done, and I think it's because you have your cake and eat it too. You are accessible to new readers who maybe know of the characters through cultural osmosis, but they have never watched an episode of Space Ghost. They've never seen Captain Planet. They only know Speed Racer through the 2008 movie, um, and uh, and so they're like, oh, I'm interested in this character and sort of the concept behind it. Great. All you got to do is get the first trade and you're good to go. Um, and I think at the same time, it has really appealed to many of the diehards because I think most people understand that those cartoons, particularly Space Ghost and Speed Racer that came out in the late 60s, were very much, products of their time. They were told
Sure.
with sort of the storytelling conventions of their era. But trying to do a one for one repeat of that would I think come across a little dated. And so I think they like seeing that, oh, like this person clearly, knows what I grew up with, clearly did their homework. And at the same
Sure.
time, they get to see these sort of childhood icons having grown up beside them, sort of retelling these stories, but with modern storytelling conventions, and sort of taking all the disparate elements that sometimes were a little discordant, in the original context, and figuring out ways to like, how do I make this a more cohesive kind of universe that everybody kind of fits, in a really smooth fashion. A really good example of this actually is our upcoming issue of Speed Racer, which is coming out in June. Um, there was a Speed Racer villain called Mark Megalotun. He was the man in the mask. He had this like crazy, like it was supposed to be, I think, like a cubist kind of mask. He was an evil supervillain mastermind who was threatening to like blow up cities with rockets, and he was telling cities to give him like their most precious paintings, and made Speed kind of his errand boy, like blackmailed Speed and being his errand boy. Um,
Yeah.
and that is a lot of different, that's a lot of different elements in a character in a show that's ostensibly about a race car driver. And so, when I looked at that and I was sort of coming up with villains and different types of adventures for Speed to go on, I was like, having Mark Megalotun as like a mustache twirling like supervillain is probably not the way I'm gonna go. But if you make him into like a pop art themed race car driver, that's fun and that's interesting and that sort of still speaks to the spirit of the character while fitting him
Right.
in more smoothly into the context of Speed's adventures as a race car driver. Um, so yeah, doing things like that, and I think, putting my own spin on these characters in a way that still has some sort of connection to the spirit of the original, or has some sort of
Right.
concept or connection to their concept. Zorak and Space Ghost being a big example in that.
Well, they're seeing that you respect the character that they love.
Yeah, yeah, and showing that there's still a lot of life left in them. There's still a lot of room to make things feel fresh and unpredictable and unique. And so, and as somebody who loves kind of injecting a lot of different genre influences, a lot of pop culture influences, that really kind of speaks to me. In that, I can say, okay, one issue of Space Ghost is going to be kind of horror themed, with Zorak, our Zorak two-parter, where we sort of started with kind of the creepy serial killer, and then sort of turned on a dime to turn it into like a surprise Lovecraft, adventure. The space vampires, sort of the idea of the haunted house and you're being stalked by a monster inside of it, But then you can also be like, okay, we're going to do a heist this issue. We're gonna do a time travel adventure. We're gonna riff on Terminator or Days of Future Past this time. That has really, I think, been very fun for me. I think it's kind of lended itself well to our done in one and done it two approach that we've done a lot for this series. So, yeah, these old properties still have a lot of life left in them. And I think,
Yeah, and Space Ghost, I mean, anywhere I look on social media, people are raving about this series. This far into it, too. It's not like it's issue one, issue two.
yeah,
At, what is
we're
it, 11, 15? Where are you at?
no, we're actually we're on pre-orders for our 26th issue right now.
26.
Uh,
Jeez.
yeah, and I'm in the middle of writing our 29th issue right now. And
Jeez.
we have long running plans that could take us, potentially even to issue 50. So we're Jonathan Lau and I are on this book for the long haul. I sort of once I kind of got a sense of our big summer event, which is going to kick off actually in Space Coast Annual. That is Space Coast Annual #2, which is up for pre-orders right now. You can order it through your local comic shop. It's sort of the capstone for our second year of stories on the book. That issue. Not only is it sort of a really nice bookend to the first issue of Volume 2, which was sort of a conversation between Space Coast sidekicks, Jan and Jace, and their long lost grandfather, Dr. Henry Contra. That first issue was sort of our way of kind of refreshing old readers and bringing in new readers to the fold, sort of asking, why does the universe need a Space Ghost? And sort of having sort of a Space Ghost adventure kind of intercut in between this conversation. And so this annual is sort of a response to that conversation.
Okay.
Space
Okay.
Ghost has been kind of locked into the adventure of his life, fighting against Tempest, the Time Master. And so we have sort of part three of our big three-parter coming out in June. Um, Suffice to say, Space Ghost victory doesn't come without a cost. And so he's really kind of thinking long and hard about his future, both as a superhero, but also as a surrogate father to Jan and Jace. And so it's time for Space Ghost to have a conversation of his own. And it's with kind of a very unexpected source. And meanwhile, we will see sort of another Space Ghost adventure where they have to stop Magnus, who is sort of the stilt man of the Space Ghost universe. He's got a suit of armor that's got telescoping arms and legs, a little Dr. Octopus in there, and his mysterious reality warping partner, the alien. They have stolen a pretty volatile piece of technology that, if not handled properly, could kill a lot of people. And so Space Ghost and the twins are sort of scrambling to try to kind of get this technology back. And Magnus and the alien can have a secret of their own that once Space Ghost kind of finds out what that is, it's going to really kind of hit him where he lives and sort of this ambivalence that he's been feeling since Tempest is going to finally come to a head. But also our annual is going to tee up our big Space Ghost event that's going to kick off in September. Space Ghost universe is going to get a whole lot bigger. We are bringing the Herculoids into the fold, which is Alex Toth's
Oh, wow.
other classic sci-fi space.
What was the white blob looking thing called?
Yeah, the blobs, Gloop and Gleep, the foremost fearless wonders.
Okay. Yeah, it's been, once you said the name, it triggered, but then, I mean,
Yeah.
it's been
So,
ages since I
for those who don't know who the Herculoids are, on the heels of Space Ghost's success, Hanna-Barbera said, we want to do another series that's sort of in the same kind of tone and vein as Space Ghost. And so they created a team called the Herculoids. And imagine if Conan the Barbarian lived in space, married Shanna the She-Devil, had a son who's basically tween Tarzan, and then hung out with a pack of interstellar kaiju and defended their jungle planet from pirates and industrialists that were seeking to plunder their land. That's the Herculoids in a nutshell. We've got Xandor, a space barbarian who sort of, I watched every episode of the original series to kind of build a new continuity for the Herculoids, sort of scaffolding on top of the amazing Tennessee run that Tom Znignowski wrote last year for the team. Xandor is sort of the patriarch of the family. He was taken as a child and forced to fight in an Emperor Neron's arena as a gladiator of kyanite. And so he fought in the arena for years, side by side with his battle beast Tundro, who's one of the Herculoids. He's sort of a Triceratops rhinoceros hybrid who has these sort of armor-plated frills and can fire projectiles from his hollowed-out horn. Um, uh, Xandor and Tundra spent many years sort of learning how to fight. Unfortunately, the Emperor was very upset by sort of their growing fame and sicked his sort of feared monster on them, a protoplasm, an enslaved protoplasm named Gloop. Things were not looking good for Xandor, but luckily for him, somebody crashes into the arena, and we find out that it's a young woman named Tara, who is riding on a star dragon named Zok, and followed by a mighty rock ape named Igu. She was raised in the Rock Village by the village elder Corsac, and has sort of, been moonlighting as kind of a freedom fighter. To basically say that Amzot is supposed to be a free world and supposed to be a free world for everybody. And so that's sort of our backstory for the Herculoids is that Xandor and Tara, Tara kind of gave Xandor this second chance at life, really taught him that the planet of Amzot, there's more than just death and pain and blood. That it is a land of just unmatched beauty as well as danger. And that freedom is something that's always worth fighting for. And when they had their son, Dorno, that sort of really kind of like I think solidified it for Xandor. That sort of this past of pain and fear and bloodshed was finally something that's behind him. He's sort of built this family as his second chance, and in an act of solidarity, Gloop, that same protoplasm that once tried to kill him on the day of Xandor's son's birth, splits into a smaller clone, Gleep, and I think that that idea of the Herculoids is something really fun, where you're being able to take, whereas Space Ghost is like sci-fi superhero adventure. The Herculoids are really science fantasy, in a lot of ways. You're really you can see kind of that pulp adventure.
Very wild characters.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's something to them about Space Ghost is this found family story, and I've always been thinking about, well, what would happen if they met a family they didn't like, that came from like a very, the opposite side of the tracks, who did things very, very differently, but also had kind of the muscle to back it up. Space Ghost is used to being the toughest guy in the room, but Xandor's not from around here. And something that we've explored in this book is that the Herculoids' unique physiology, as well as Xandor and Tara and Dorno, is that they're able to metabolize trace elements of quasarite from their ecosystem. Those who watched the original series Herculoids, they had an energy rock that literally they would put in their slingshots, and so they would fire rocks that would kind of explode on impact. We fleshed that out as it's a whole element that is unique to the planet of Amzot that is sort of a raw conduit of cosmic energy that can, it can power spaceships, it can power weapons. If you have direct contact with it, it can temporarily enhance your speed and strength and aggression. Meanwhile, the Herculoids have been sort of slowly mainlining this stuff their entire lives, which means that they are tough customers. Um, Without spoiling too much of what's going on in our big event, something has happened to Xandor that has made him backslide in a big way. Real Namor the Submariner kind of vibes going on. And
Okay.
that is going to be sort of the context of his first meeting with Space Ghost. And it's, at first, they are not going to love each other, for sure. It is the city mouse and the country mouse. They've got very different ways of doing things. Space Ghost sort of sees him as sort of this kind of, you know, backwards, savage in a lot of ways. And meanwhile, Xandor is like, you wouldn't survive one day in the pits, and so it's nice to kind of see Space Ghost partnering with somebody who can really meet him at his level. And so this is sort of a big blockbuster 5-part event that Jonathan Lau and I are working on. It really is sort of us kind of it's our first experiment with real long form storytelling. With Space Ghost to the Herculoids, we wanted to make sure that when we introduce those characters, we've already had 2 years to establish Space Ghost. We wanted to make sure this story felt big. It is sort of
Sure,
the
sure.
biggest swing, the most action-packed adventure that we've told with these characters to date. And Jonathan really has worked wonders in making these characters their own. The Herculoids all look really cool and interesting and unique. Um, But for my money, actually, my favorite interactions that he's been drawing has been with Xandor and Tara. They are Tara is such an interesting character to me. I think, she's the linchpin that makes the Herculoids work, but also, there's not a whole lot of feminine energy to Space Ghost. There's his sidekick Jan, but beyond that, there's like, I think, three, excuse, excuse me, three female villains in all of Space Ghost mythology. Whereas, like,
Yeah.
having a character who's married, who has a child, who they are still very clearly deeply in love with each other. I took a lot of inspiration from Leonidas and Gorgo from 300. Um,
Okay.
Seeing those scenes, Jonathan um, really knocked it out of the park. I was very pleasantly surprised to see how well he kind of resonated with those scenes of just like, yeah, Xandor and Tara have seen a lot together, and they
Yeah,
are,
that's an interesting dynamic to bring into the fold.
yeah, and I think it's also something that I think speaks to the core of Space Ghost's, I think, dramatic arc, which is his story is a found family story. It's a
Right.
widower and two orphans sort of kind of building together this kind of makeshift family, this makeshift partnership,
Sure.
that they are choosing to sort of, stand together and be loyal to each other every day, every single day. But it is still different from just, uh, two people meeting and falling in love and marrying and building a family together. And so, it's definitely, it's something that I think kind of hits Space Ghost at his deepest insecurities.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think these are both guys that love their kids. And so I think that core thread is sort of the thing that, like, will ultimately bring Space Ghost and Xandor together, is that, like, their kids are the most important things in their lives. And so, yeah, it's very fun. We're sort of bringing in a lot of different lore from both Space Ghost and Herculoids. The story that we've told, I'm really excited in that we are sort of able to get a lot of the best of both worlds. Both seeing the Herculoids having an adventure in an urban environment, which is something that we have rarely, if ever, seen out of them. But also, what happens when the Space Ghost crew sort of has to deal with the dangerous jungles of Amzot. Um, we've got some really cool villains. The Evil Collector from Space Ghost is one of my favorites. We've been sort of keeping him, in the back pocket for a long time. He's kind of the brainiac of Space Ghost. That in that he would shrink people down and sort of kidnap them for his collection.
And
Um,
he's going to be a part of this event.
he's going to be the main villain of our event. But
Okay.
he's also teaming up with a Herculoids villain, Meccano, the Machine Man, who is sort of he's basically the evil collector's sort of enslaved lieutenant. Our take on the evil collector is he is the chief prison warden of the Galactic Federation. And so that is sort of like, he kind of wears that name as a badge of honor, in that, like, yes, he sort of collects the worst offenders from around the universe. Um, Without spoiling too much, though, he is a villain. He does have his own ulterior motives. And that's sort of what's going to bring the Herculoids into the fold. He is sort of he has discovered Quasarite is on the planet Amzot, and
Yeah.
we'll just say that his first um, expedition to Amzot is fairly cataclysmic, and is going to sort of put Space Ghost, or put Xandor on his tail. And I think that kind of speaks to, I think, one of the core divides between Space Ghost and the Herculoids to me is, the Space Ghost operates outside of the law. He's a vigilante, but at the same time, he is kind of a defender of the status quo. Like, he knows that there are corrupt people, in the Galactic Patrol or the Federation, but he knows ultimately, that democracy is still, like, kind of the best option that they have. Um, the Herculoids are very anti-establishment, however. They're used to, when they come face to face with the establishment, it's because they want to steal something from them. It's because they want to enslave them. It's because they want to, pillage their entire planet's ecosystem and make them, a dump like they do every other planet. And
Right.
so, it's sort of one of those things that like Space Ghost in a lot of ways is sort of, he doesn't always respect the badge, but he respects the law. And meanwhile, the Herculoids are like, what's the law ever done for us? And so that is, I think, a very interesting dynamic that kind of adds a lot of interesting kind of friction and dramatic
Sure.
tension between the two teams. So I'm very excited for that. Like I said, it all kicks off in Space Ghost Annual, which is up for pre-orders now. So call your local comic shop, and then tell them that you want Space Ghost and Herculoids. You want that event kicking off in September. But yeah, that'll be a 5 issue event, and that'll kick off to our third year of storytelling. That'll begin, I believe, in 2027.
Nice, nice. And while you're talking to your local comic shop, tell them that their retailer levels pledges on the OZ number three,
Yes.
so that they can have that book in their shop and draw on some even some more customers and fan of David's work. Uh, yeah, man, this is just it. I'm so happy for you. You just seem to be just on just this incredible roll and run, and at the same time being able to have fun with it.
Yeah,
In some of these books.
I every step of my career has been very unexpected to me more than anybody else. And I'm very grateful. I mean, I mentioned it earlier about the OZ, but I think it's the case for my whole career is that, comics are a team sport. I wouldn't have gotten anywhere without sort of that kind of that legion of readers and retailers and fans and press and editors and collaborators who really kind of champion me every step of the way. And
Yeah,
and
fellow creators that promote you, that just rave about you, or
I've been very lucky, and I think a lot of it's because I come to this as honestly as a fan first and foremost. I've only been a professional writer for 10 years, but I've been a comic book fan for almost 40. And
sure,
so,
sure.
there are people in this business who I consider myself um, very lucky. I won't very lucky to consider them colleagues now, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
seeing that, people who have really shouted out my work, people like Scott Snyder and Gail Simone and Mark Russell, they are, nobody's more surprised than me. Um, but I think it also speaks to that, as a comics creator, I think it's very easy, especially when you're starting out, to assume that you have more control over your career than you do. And I think once you learn to kind of embrace the unexpected, to sort of ride the wave where it takes you, um, then things start to open up. I mean, I I think I've been really lucky, and I think that the vast majority of the work that I've done, I feel like I've been able to kind of put my own stamp on it. I've been able to try something different, flex different muscles. I feel
right,
satisfied with almost every book I've ever written. I feel pretty confident still, even from my early work, to be able to give it to somebody at a convention. And
sure.
I think. But I think if I had been super locked in and said, okay, well, I'm only gonna gun for writing Spider-Man, for example, that can limit you, Whereas I don't think even 5 years ago, if somebody had said, oh, you would be having the time of your career writing a Space Ghost book and a Speed Racer book, I'd be like, that's crazy. I'd say that licensed
Right,
books
right.
are soulless, cash grab. Being open to these kinds of opportunities is, I think, the reason why I've been able to enjoy the career that I've had. And, comics are, it's a war of attrition. You have to take a million swings before something connects. And, I think in
Sure.
that way, like it's a numbers game. You really have to make your own luck. And that's the only way you can do that is by constantly knocking on doors, by constantly sort of, taking your swings. And yeah, I think you knock on 1,000 doors and you take a thousand swings. Eventually something will connect. It's just it can be long and slow and painful and uncertain to get there. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
consider myself very, very fortunate. Very lucky. This is my dream job. And being able to connect with readers is really just the highlight of all of it. And that's the thing that kind of inspires me to get out of bed every day and try to deliver my A game.
Oh man, well you're just crushing it. I yeah, I that's the bodega cat. Gotta have one if
I
you
was
got a
gonna say you can't
bodega.
have a bodega without a cat.
Right, right. With Space Ghost, man. Man, I hope you hit 50 issues with that.
Man, that'd
Get
be
that
great.
milestone issue. You guys could have like about 20 variants, this big celebration and just a mega event.
It would be great. I would
Fingers
love it.
crossed.
I've told my editors and I've told Jonathan Lau, I was like, I don't know the last time that anybody hit 50 issues with a consecutive creative team on a superhero book.
Right.
It might be Bendis and Bagley on Ultimate Spidey. That would be kind of neat. And I think Jonathan is the rare artist who could do it.
And you know, and that kind of says something to other publishers that, you know, you don't have to just keep making four issue miniseries or, you know,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
can go with this. You find, you know, what works and what fans, you know, respond to, and you know, let's all enjoy it.
I can tell you as a writer, we do love longer runways. It gives us a lot more room to work with. But I think it's also really great to, I think, kind of be returning to my roots. I got my start as in indie comics, and I always love kind of writing a little bit off the beaten path, as much as I do love writing for the big two. And I think the OZ really kind of speaks to that in a really profound way because doing Kickstarter and doing self-publishing, first off, it's very empowering as a creator, because you don't have to ask anybody for permission. You can literally just take your books out to the public, and
Right.
they can support you. But I think also, there's that one-to-one connection and interactivity with our readers that you don't get anywhere else. I can't, there's no way I could tell you every single person who reads Space Ghost right now. I
Sure.
know I've spoken with every single person who has,
Engaging with your backers on the
yeah,
platform and, you know, constant
and there's
communication and
something really nice that, every night at the end of the campaign, I, I would go through every backer who backed that day and send them a note. Because, and that is something you don't often get to do in this business.
yeah. And I think on the other end of it, I think for fans, they're like, wow, I have a comic creator that's talking to me. Oh man, this writer that does all these books I love, he just emailed me. You know, there's that it
Yeah.
could almost add a little fanboy experience for them that they're interacting with you. So it's a great, you know, little harmony that will, you know,
Well, that's very kind of
very
you.
powerful.
You really hit me right in my imposter syndrome, where I'm like, oh, why would anybody care about an email from me? But that's very kind of you to say. Yeah, I mean, I think, um, the great thing about comics is, yeah, we are an industry that is, I think, by its very nature and size, very intimate, and being able to, I'm I do conventions, and the fact that, like, you can go to a convention and, like, meet the person who wrote your favorite comic, um,
Yeah.
you know, you don't often get to do that in any other industry. And so, and there's, fans get so much access to creators in terms of social media, in terms of newsletters and the like. And so, yeah, that is, a really unique part about our industry, and it's one of my favorite parts too. I writing, the act of writing is an isolating job. You hole up in your
Sure.
office, you sit there for 8 to 12 hours, you're writing something in isolation, and you have no idea how it's going to land.
And dealing with deadlines and,
And then,
you know, and
it
social media that you have to perform to promote and
yeah, it cuts both ways in that, when you meet a stranger who says, "Oh, I read your work and it really resonated with me," there's nothing quite like it. And I think that that's sort of, every comic is its own leap of faith. And whenever
yeah.
I hear from a reader saying that they liked it, I think that sort of leap of faith was rewarded. So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
even like people cosplaying as characters that you wrote.
Yeah, yeah, I've met a few. I've met Space Ghost and Speed Racer, cosplayers. I've met Moon Knight cosplayers. I even, met a Spencer and Locke cosplayer once.
Oh wow, nice.
and that's also kind of a real trip. I'm still waiting for a Captain Planet cosplayer to stop by my booth at some point.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm sure it's coming.
you
It's
know,
coming.
so it's been really nice, just as somebody who is a fan first and foremost, to be able to sort of establish that connection with other fans.
Yeah,
It's something I don't take for granted.
it's been an incredible 10 years for you, and I hope another 10, 20, 30 for you to
I'd like
just,
that. I'd like that. I
you
always
know,
said when I started, I wanted to be a 30-year man in the
30
business.
year. Okay.
So
Well,
uh,
that would,
1 decade down, two to go.
it's
Yes,
going to be quite the legacy that you're leaving, and the mark that you're making on the industry as a whole. So it's, and you deserve it. So
thank
continued success, and I hope nothing but the best for you, David. And
you.
like I said, I'm excited for the OZ3.
Yes,
Like you said, everyone, the Fantasy Epic returns. You can get the final issue. You can get caught up if you missed the first two campaigns or one or the other. Get the variants and see this conclusion as 26, 20. So what, 10 years and 8 years in the making?
yeah,
If you
yeah.
started in 2018,
I
so
started
yeah,
in
it's been
2018, so this book is
an
this,
8 year
this book is
culmination
this book
is
is
all
has
coming down to
stretched
this.
almost my entire career.
That's
Um, uh,
crazy. But
so
it's finally, it's coming
it's
to a
gonna
head.
it's gonna be here, and I can tell you when you read the whole thing in one shot, um, it's I think it's gonna hit like a truck. So
It's awesome.
I
And I
can't
hope it
wait for
does.
people to join our Emerald Army. If you're watching this, go to the Kickstarter page right now. It's tinyurl.com/the OZ comic. And back early, back often. Send the link to your friends. We've got all sorts of tiers for any level of price point and involvement. So yes, can't wait for you guys to check it
If you're
out.
just a digital person, if you're a collector and want prints, if you want signatures, if you want, I mean, there'll be a lot of options, and I know from just your past campaigns. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we encourage everyone to go get it. It's an incredible series, and it's been too long, but it's finally gonna wrap up, and I get to see where this thing all ends. And I just want to take the time and thank David Pepose for taking the time to speak with us, doing this Kickstarter spotlight, and we get the honor of being able to promote and feature the OZ and David
Awesome.
here at Comics Bodega. So, David, thank you for taking the time
My
to
pleasure.
speak with me in your busy,
No, it's just me. I'm just
Hollywood
coming off a head cold.
lifestyle.
But I appreciate you taking the time for having me and for having my back from the very beginning. It means a lot.
And you always have a platform with whatever I do. So, I no problem, from one of the greatest comic book pitch men in the business. That's one of the first things I noticed when I saw David at a convention. I'm like, he's got this down. He just runs this thing off, and it's just, not too many words, but not too few. Just hitting it.
A lot of
Uh,
practice. A lot of
it's
practice. I say it to myself every night in the mirror before I go to bed. Um, but thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for watching. And
yes.
back the Kickstarter. Join us for the OZ. This book is going to be awesome, and we would love to have you along for the ride.
Man, big ups to David Pepose for kicking it with us here at the Funky Flavor Podcast and Comics Bodega. Be sure to visit the OZ number 3 campaign. You can visit tinyurl.com/theOZcomic. I'll take you right to the campaign. You can also follow David Pepose online on Facebook at David Pepose Comics. On X and IG, you can catch him at PeposeD, and Blue Sky, PeposeD.bsky.social, and on the interwebs at davidpepose.com. And for more from me, the Funky Flavor Podcast and Comics Bodega, visit us online at TahoeJBennett across socials, at Comics Bodega across socials, and at the Funky Flavor on IG and Blue Sky. Give us a like, subscribe, follow, do all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more interviews with great comic book creators. Thanks for listening.